This podcast is powered by The Plug.
So I never like to kink shame anybody unless it's like harming people or like they don't want to be into it. But like the step brother, stepsister thing, I hope like I'm not gonna like blow open the industry by like saying this, but I guess reckless behavior. Everyone hates shooting it. Okay. I hate to tell, like, at least like the people like I've ran into, right? Like I've ran into like a couple of like male talents, like, dude, like, thank God I'm not doing like I'm fucking my stepsister scene. Like I think a lot of people like they get tired of it. And then most times like these guys who are like in their 30s, you know, they're working with a girl who's like 18 and it kind of like, I don't think like they have like a bad moral compass about it, right? But when all you're doing is feeling like you're busting down like your little sister or like your older brother or like your mom or your stepmom or whatever, it like there's something about it that is just like exhausting, because the thing with like the porn industry is that we create the trends. Yeah, I guess absolutely. You would say, right? You're creating a trend, and if we're creating it, if we're putting it out there and people are consuming it and they think like, okay, like at a mass thing, then it recognizes it. Right. And they said that like it's one of the highest grossing like porns that people watch.
Be surprised in Salt Lake City, where all, you know, the LDS churches and like where you have a very strong cultural, you know, bubble, but that's where all of the stepbro and stepsis is coming out of. So I think for me, I'm an only child, so I'm able to like engage in that content like purely fantasy. There is no real version of the incest fantasy for me, but I know other people like they might be into it or they might be open to it. I know there's a handful of gay porn stars, and I don't have their names, that are like, you know, actual brothers and they perform together and they're also partnered together. And so I definitely think that represents like one end of the spectrum, and then you know, everyone else is kind of maybe more in the middle. Or
I haven't shot. Okay, no, I did. I lied. For Penthouse, it was like a stepbrother, stepsister situation. Cool. It was with Lucas Frost. And if you guys know Lucas Frost, he's very handsome. He takes very good care of himself. I'm pretty sure he's Italian, if I'm not mistaken. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure he's Italian, because I got my radar on my Italian boys because they're my favorite. But it was like contrast enough to where it's like, yeah, like stepbrother, stepsister, like okay, could like work. this is cool. Like I didn't feel like I was working with someone who it's like, okay, we look too similar, like this could really be my leg, you know what I mean? Because like that's ultimately like the goal that they're going for, right? Legally we have to say stepbrother, stepsister, things like that, but you know what people are going for. I particularly don't care for it when it's on, like, if that's the script for the day when I get it, which I said I've only probably done it once so far. I don't like it. I don't like what it like represents, but that's just me personally. Sure. I think it could be fun, like you said, like when you're like the only child. I come from a family of 4.
Okay, see,
and
that's valid.
Like, yeah, and it's like I like the idea of like my brother or somebody or like a stepbrother, like.
Do you think it's more of like the energy behind it? Yeah,
I think it's valid. Like the energy behind it, and like I know porn, it gives people like a space to where like they can discover, like have an outlet for like fantasies. So like, you know, if you do have like that interest, that curiosity behind it, like, okay, like at least you're rubbing it out and like you're not actually living it. Now, there's some people out here who take it to that level and they start living it. That's not, you know, live your truth. I don't stand behind it. I don't like it. I've never really watched any. I don't think I never click on stepbrother, stepsister porn.
Can I give you my opinion?
Yes, go for it.
As someone who doesn't have siblings, I feel like I'm more open to the fantasy than maybe someone like in your position where you do have the siblings and you're aware of that dynamic. But I feel like for me, so much of like where I got started was in the niche and was in kink. And so I feel like I'm very open to almost anything, like kind of like what you said, as long as it's not hurting anyone, as long as it's not predatory in nature. And so just thinking about like sexuality and repression and stuff like that, like I think it's one of the most common genres in straight porn. And I don't watch straight porn a lot, but when I see it, it's kind of like as an outsider, like when I log into Pornhub and it's on the straight mode and I'm like, oh, that's not for me and I got to switch it back. But like, I do see like a common trend of like the step bro and step sis stuff. And like, I think that speaks to like a larger trend of maybe where porn is like right now. And the fact that like, you know, the search results for different states kind of like reflects that. But I don't know. I feel like we just love fucked up shit.
Dude, yeah, I do like fucked up shit. Like, don't get me wrong. I watch them. I'd be on the dark side of Pornhub. Like I said, like not nothing that's like crazy. Like I said, like I like my like German gang. I like some nasty. Like I have like a cum fetish, right? Like I love a lot of cum.
Me too.
Yeah, so like that's like a thing, right? I have a big cum fetish. So I'm like, okay, the more the merrier.
Yeah. I think the big thing is just porn gives you a moment of safety and exploration when you're by yourself. It does. You know, I can't speak for other people, but I feel like when you're growing up and you're going through like sexual experiences, like porn is like how you like explore that. And it's like if you're, you know, an only child or you have a sibling, then like that's probably something that you're going to see eventually. Like that stuff is going to affect you and that is going to inform your view of pornography. And whether or not that's healthy, I think that's open to interpretation, but I think it's just the beauty of the genre that we can get, you know, race play, we can get the step bro, step sis, or we can just have like just straight up fucking and, you know, for the fun of it.
I just worry sometimes that people, like there's people who, I would say that a majority of people that watch porn, they have their fantasy fulfilled. They move on with their day. Yes. Now there are like the rare occasions where people like they watch it so much that their perception starts to get skewed and it becomes like their fantasy is blurred between their reality. And you're like, okay, like this might be crossing like a boundary too much. I think I've heard worse stuff when I was like dancing. There was like this man, he came in and he was talking to my friend. And he was like, oh, you remind me of my daughter. My daughter's so hot. My daughter's so sexy.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you or your company are looking to jump into the podcast world, now is the time. The Plug Agency is here to connect you to the full power of podcasting. You just record and leave the rest to us. The people are listening and want to hear from you. Theplug-agency.com. That's theplug-agency.com. Click the link in the episode description for an exclusive offer.
And so that's when like the fantasy just spills over into the reality and there's no boundary between them. We don't like that.
No, we don't like that. And I'm like, bro, like, should we call like child protective services? Like, is there something we should be doing? And like, I've heard people like my daughter is like 18 and she's just really hot and like really sad. I'm like, oh, sir, like nobody wants to hear that. Like say like your daughter's friend. Right. Like, you know what I mean? Say like something like it's all like whatever. But I'm like, bro, like you just really just came in here and said that to us. Right. Like I get like this strip club, like it's a safe place where people feel like they can say anything. But like that's like when I start to think like that's a little too, for me, like that's it. Like that's not a little too, that's too much.
That's there, right.
Like you should really figure out what's going on. Like you should really probably seek like therapy for that, because like that's like I don't know, like I think about that. I think about like if my dad said something like that to me, I'd be like, oh no, like that's uncomfortable. But for the most part, if you're just like living out that fantasy, cool. And I understand, I'm playing devil's advocate here, like playing both sides of the fence. I can see why it's hot because you're not related to this person, like whatever. Like, oh, like I married my wife. My wife has like this hot, like 25-year-old daughter. Right. Cool. Okay. But like, it's still cringy to me.
Sure.
It's still super cringy. Sure. You
and
know?
like, you know, what's good for thee, maybe not for me, right? That's why we have genres. But I think as long as we can agree, like someone knowing where the fantasy begins and more importantly, where it ends, like that's how we have any sort of healthy kink. But as soon as people start saying like, oh, you remind me of my family, like, you know, I think we can both agree it's a healthy sexual boundary not to involve people in our immediate family unless that's something very specific towards, you know, the example of the two gay porn stars that are brothers and they're together. Like that's a choice that they arrived at through a lot of understanding and communication. But for most people, you know, we're kind of not into that stuff. And so it just kind of depends. It just depends.
You do you. Like it's not for me, but you know what? It's not my problem to deal with.
Sure.
You know, we're not here to solve the world's problems.
Sure.
But I will say, with that being said, you said like there's like the map of like what's trending.
Yeah.
It's so funny that you said that. So during like the Trump era, post-COVID, it was everything ethnic and ebony. That year
It's a
for
vibe.
Ebony was like
It's like, I
number
wonder what
one.
that is.
Yeah, you
Right.
wonder what that
It's
is,
a reflection
right?
of the times.
Yeah, so I feel like it was crazy. And now we're like in the stepbrother, stepsister era, but
Right.
like that was like a real thing. And then for a while there, it was like boobs,
Yeah,
huge
just
boobs.
Giant.
Tiggle bitties
Yes.
was like the thing. So yeah, that is a real thing. Like if you guys want to see what people are watching at in your state, go to Pornhub, or you can like even just like research this. Like it does it state by state of like what people are watching. Colorado, we love you. You guys like tiggle bitties.
Mm-hmm.
Colorado likes big titties.
We do. I mean, why not though?
Yeah. And what is it for you though? Like because I know like you're on a different side
Yeah.
of Pornhub than I am, or just any porn
Well,
site.
so it's
really.
interesting for me because I'm like, I'm a fetish kid. So I hang out in like the gutters of this vid, where there's like scat videos and things that are extremely niche for a small group of people. And so living next to those videos, I've learned just to appreciate genre so much, and that the more niche the content gets, the more people tend to appreciate it. And so it's like, there are some people that they need incest videos in terms of the fantasy or something that mirrors reality. And maybe it's because they're working through attractions that they don't understand, or maybe they just think that it's forbidden and fucked up and hot. And it's like, for me, as someone who doesn't have siblings, I would be able to engage in like a stepbro or an incest fantasy very easily because it doesn't require me to move through any barriers. And so it's like, hire me if you want to do an incest scene, but for somebody else,
yeah, it might be different,
right? And so
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing is just like how we talked about race play not too long ago, knowing who your audience is and knowing how to engage like with the basic principles of consent is always where you begin. Like I'm sure there is a type of client that can sit down and be like, hey, I have this fantasy of having a hot stepdaughter, and I imagine it would be someone as beautiful as you, and how do you, then they're introducing you to like what it means to them and what it does for them. But when they're like, oh, I have someone who's underage and you look just like them, it's like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, exactly.
So
like
there's a
it's
right way.
shocking. There is a right way. And I think like what a lot of people don't know how to do that we do very well as like sex workers is we know how to express our sexuality, and we know how to communicate that to people, whether that's a partner, whether that's like a scene partner, your actual in-life partner, any partner, right? It's like we communicate that, and like sometimes people are such a taken back by how honest we can be with ourselves and like how we talk about it, but like you have to be.
Yes.
And I think a lot of people have a hard time expressing their sexuality, so it does come off as like rancid or like raunchy, like, ooh,
Yes.
no, that's not how you say that, like that's terrible, you know what I mean? Like you just got to know how to communicate what you're trying to express and what you're trying to say, and then it's like, okay, well, if you say it in like a right manner, people are going to be like, oh, okay, I understand what you're trying to get across here. Still might not be my thing,
Right.
but now I understand it. Now I just know you're not some like creep, like
Right.
pedophile or something. You
Communication
know what I mean?
is everything. And I'd even go as far to say like the most fucked up sexual fantasy would just be the one that you don't share and that you
Yeah.
repress and you don't acknowledge, because like we all have things that live in us, and like whether it's considered healthy and vanilla and monogamous, or it's like more on the extreme, like it's valid, and like there has to be a way to explore it healthily
Yeah, but-
and
yeah.
consensually
Yeah,
and all that,
consensual,
all
yeah.
the lees. And so
Yeah.
it's like there's just got to be a way that feels good. And usually when you're on the money, you can tell, like when you see the videos of the stepbro and the stepsis, you can tell when people are really feeling it and when they're like, oh, this is another one of those scenes that we've got
Yeah.
to do. So I think the authenticity is key, and just making sure you know who your audience is and you're inviting the right people, but you're doing it in the right way.
Exactly. That's always number one. And, like I said, like I've done my stepbrother, stepsister scene, and I think I just like mentally just didn't even think
Right.
about it. So I was like, okay, like I'm here with Lucas, but there's some girls that I know who are like, that's all they get booked for. Like that's another thing about being like a teeny bopper, like 18, you come in there, like that's all you're doing for like the first
Right.
5 years of your career. And you might be doing it for a long time, even because, like some people, like they just naturally, like they might have like a younger body, like
Right.
no matter what, like that's just how they're built. And like, unfortunately, like that's your whole career.
You get typecasted.
You get
kind of, yeah.
typecasted, and that might be what you're doing. So, I'm like I can be like someone's like slutty older sister. I don't think I've quite crossed over to MILF yet.
We got time.
We got time.
It's
We got
okay.
time
There's
to do
no
MILF.
rush.
I'll do
There's
MILF
no
porn. I'll
rush.
be somebody's mom, I guess.
Love
That's
it.
trending too. MILF porn is.
It is.
MILF porn is like in right
And
now.
it's not going to go out of style.
No.
I hope
Everyone
not.
loves mommy milkers.
We do. Everybody does. I was breastfed. Like, let's go.
We like that. We love the mommy milkers, right? So I mean, when I graduate into MILF porn, that's the day.
Absolutely.
We'll be out here.
I love it.
Yes, we love that. But you know what? We're gonna have to have Ryan in here because she I don't know, but she don't care. I'm gonna tell her right now.
Spill it.
Rodeo. She has like a very funny like scat story that she has to tell you.
I would love to hear it.
Yeah, it's fun. And she said it was with a doctor. So doctors, I guess doctors like they don't.
Doctors can be freaks too.
I think what it is because I'm gonna give you like a just like the gist of it. I think she said like because he was a doctor, like he said he doesn't care about like how body fluids like. That girl is wild, and I love her. I feel like you guys have a lot in common. I feel like you guys have like a big like.
I need to meet her.
Yeah, bitch, come back from Mexico. Come back. I don't know where you come back. Okay.
We need them down girls.
We need you. Come back, Ryan. Rodeo. We love you. Come back. Meet Matthew because we need it.
Yes, please.